Hey, it's Francis. In this video, I'm going to show you how I did the music in the announcement video for MapCrow's new Monstrous book. So Kyle from MapCrow reached out to me with some cool ideas, and we did a couple of demos first. So let's listen to a little bit of those real quick. So that's the first vibe. Second one is the one that we ended up actually using as a starting point for the final recording. Here's the third one. That last piece in there. I'll use that for something else. And then here's the final version that we ended up going with. Basically a copy paste of that second version with a lot of extra production happening. You can see that the demos are pretty robust already, but I've got a little bit more going on here, and essentially I just save the really time-consuming stuff for once we have the concept locked. You can see we've got a lot more audio recording than this one. I've redone the bass on a hardware synth. In this case, the mini mode, which is going to give you that huge low end. If you've got a subwoofer, you can hear it right now, but doesn't make a huge difference outside of a movie theater. And all these leads initially were, I think, sampler instruments. Yeah, so that sounds like oboe samples or something, and we replaced that with a little bit more abstract sounds. I used my Matrix brute for this one, and if we listen to that without the reverb send, I like recording this stuff really dry and processing it in the box. That way, if there's any changes that we want to make, we don't need to re-record the whole thing. So this is basically a very simple pulse wave with some envelope and filter, a tape echo, and a reverb send. I think I'm using the Valhalla reverbs on this one. Yeah. So that is... Valhalla Vintage Verb, which is a great plugin. This one's actually one of the ones that's actually kind of worth the money. Strongly recommend it. This instrument is done with a Deckard Stream. Again, a tape echo and a reverb send. Pretty simple. Here's the patch totally dry. It's got that weird warble that you get, the CS80 warble. which is just like the most glorious thing in the world when you run it through reverb and a delay. You could probably get a sound very, very close to that with something like the Arturia CS80 plugin. All right, let's see what we got here. A couple of soft synths. I'm using Pigments on this one. Okay, so here's my patches. I should probably put these up for any other Pigments users. You can see this patch is called Monstrous. I made these patches for the project. So as you all know, I like doing my own sound design. It's like the most fun part for me. Let's listen to this patch real quick. So low notes give you that sequenced percussive thing. High notes give you this like weird synth thing. I'm using the sample engines. They are a wonderful starting point for any type of bizarre sound. This is one of my favorite soft synths. I use it a lot. Let's check out the other sounds. I've got a couple of instances of Pigments going on here. Second one. Kind of a creepy pad. In context, I'm using it for this. I was using a choir patch initially, and Kyle thought it sounded too heroic for a monster book, and I think I'm inclined to agree. This is much more appropriate as a background texture in a song for something like this. So let's see what's going on here. Again, using the sampler engines, just such a wonderful place to start, especially with the granular synth. This is so good. I think for most of these, I'm using samples that come stock with Pigments. If I'm not, I'll find me in the comments and call me out. I'm like 99.9% sure these are stock samples and not samples that I uploaded. The stock library for these are just fantastic. Everything you really need to make most cool sounds. Every once in a while, I'll upload the sound of like a rattling chain or something like that and get a neat sound out of that one. Let's see the third one. This is another percussive layer. This is just sequenced, so I'm just holding down keys right now. So in this one, actually, let's take a look here. I know I'm covering it up. I did a version of this one with extra stuff going on. It just got too busy though. I had some like broken pottery sequences. Let's see if we can hear that even. Yeah, it just ended up being too much. It sounded like someone was breaking pottery in the background, which I guess is what's going on. But I liked it more without that sound. So you get this as the result with the combination of that one and the first one, which is sort of that percussion sequence. I like how it bounces around in the stereo field. Kind of a nice background texture with those really, really big drums, which let's get to those next. Big, big drums. So I've got a orchestral bass drum sample. I've got a Lin kick. I believe this is from Samples from Mars. That adds a nice, like, snappy thud to it. Let's hear those together. And then without the Lin. So it gives it this sort of modern twist that I think works really well for a track like this. I've got this muted anvil sound. I use this a lot. This is like one of the pieces of percussion sauce that you hear in my music. That's just like a pitch shifted anvil sample. I'm using Reaper's sampler to trigger it. And you can, pitch shift it in here. You can do a bunch of other stuff, but I have it running through basically just like stock Reaper stuff. If anyone wants this sound to try out in their music, I'd be happy to upload this if it's not already on my website. I'll just have to remember to do that. I've got these toms. These are from Native Instruments, the orchestra series, whatever they are. I love these toms. They don't really hit the way that I want toms to in like a more modern sounding track like this. So what I do is sort of a Tom Holkenborg Junkie XL type trick. I learned this from his YouTube channel actually, which I strongly recommend if you're into like if you like the soundtrack to Mad Max Fury Road and are wondering how some of those extreme sounds happen. That's the toms by themselves, and this is fully produced. And what's going on there is I've copied this sequence, which let's take a look at it. Pretty simple, right? And I've copied that sequence and I've humanized it and rendered that copy, the humanized copy. So it's like a slightly different performance, slightly varied. We can see the difference here. We'll actually be able to see if we zoom in how I did it. Looks like this one I humanized it to have a tendency to rush a little bit. And I usually will have one rush and one drag. And then I'll freeze the track. And in the frozen track, I'll go into the item settings and I'll adjust the pitch. So in this case, I've gone -3 semitones. The other one's probably, I usually do like +2 on the other one. Yeah, +2 here. And I'll go, plus or -2 from there. And the pitch difference causes the phase problems that happen with a duplicated track to be less of a big deal. Changes the waveform a lot. And that's all going through this folder, which is getting distorted. I think that Tom Holkenborg uses Decapitator for this type of trick, which is a really, really great plugin for that. I just haven't wanted to buy that series, and you've always got a plugin that will do the job. You don't need to buy another plugin for most situations, so you just find one that does a similar job. I'm using a Trident Pre clone. This is from Arturia also. I just you can see all this Arturia stuff because I bought an Arturia plugin suite. I don't want to buy like a million plugin suites, so I'll use what comes in the ones I've got and learn them. And you can see I'm just blasting it. I'm blasting the high end, and I'm overloading it and distorting it in this this preamp sim, which is I think sounds better than the distortion plugins that are stock in Reaper. So I experimented with those. I actually used to use the distortion in Reaper and the saturation in Reaper, and this sounds better, and I had it already. This is great for other stuff too. This actually sounds awesome on drums without overloading them, but in this case, the goal of it is to just make it just sound super messed up and really, really like high-endy. Let me just loop this a little bit, and we'll hear it with and without. So I'm basically trying to get this snap here, and then when you combine that with the original toms, you get all the body of the toms with this huge attack that just cuts through your mix. If I take that distorted part out and bring it back, just a huge difference. So that's what's going on with the drum production there, and that gets a little bit cooler sounding once you master it. These standard issue, you got a Gong, why not use it? I actually get lazy and have maybe like 6 or 7 recordings of the Gong that I really like, and I just drag them in from my samples. I do the same thing with cymbals, so these like little swells and things like that. I recommend just record 5, 10, 20 of them and don't deal with getting your mics out every time. You end up cutting them up, fading them differently anyway. I'll pitch shift them. I probably use Gong Swell 1. Like I probably use this recording of my Gong more than I've used recordings of the gong that I've made in context for the project. Unless I'm doing something very specific with the gong, like with the Spine of Night soundtrack, for example, I'm sort of playing the gong throughout the whole thing. In this case, it's just, yeah, you know, it's a gong swell. And in context, you don't listen to it and say like, hey, that's the same gong swell from that other song that Francis did. So that's what that sounds like in context. I think it sounds great. The other thing that you get from this is if you're going to reuse the samples, you're going to do a great job recording them. That's just the way things kind of go. These gong swells were done in a fancy studio that's not my home studio. And, you know, you can book one day in the nicest studio in the city you live in, spend $500 to $800 to essentially have incredible recordings of every single thing you own. Strongly recommend doing that. Especially like the amount of stuff you learn about engineering working with an engineer that works in that kind of studio every day is enormous. So here we got this. This is from a library of little orchestra hits and stuff like that. I don't remember where this came from, but just that's with and that's without. It adds a huge amount of oomph to the end. Our snare drum is, I think it's an 808 snare. Yeah. It's funny hearing those in context or out of context. Yeah, it's just an 808 snare with echo, little ping pong echo. Sometimes nothing beats an 808 snare. There's a reason they've been used in music production for so many years, and they're so consistently the right choice. Doesn't take up any space, but it takes up all the space at the same time. Phenomenal sound. I actually don't use them that much. I prefer 909 snares, but I wanted the little snappy thing in this one, not the like 909 snares sound like a cloud doing the like whoosh, kind of like a big fluffy snare sound. I've got this track, it's called Big Drum. I don't know what this is. This one's just called Big Drum. I don't know what library I brought this out of, but I guess that's combined with the other drums. I forgot about that one. Tune percussion. So this is sort of like the body of the accompaniment of the track. It is a combination of a bunch of sounds. A piano with a auto pan on. Harpsichord is being used for melody. This track is called Anime Piano. I just basically took a piano library and I think in this one I processed it listening to some anime soundtrack and liked the way that the piano sounded. It was like really mid-heavy and reverby. This is an instrument that I use a lot in my projects. I call it Magic Music Box. It's just a custom reverb and pan, auto pan preset with a, I think it's with Contact Factory Library actually. Let's see if I'm right. Contact Factory Library, the old one, not the new one. Music Box, cool. Sometimes the defaults are the best sounds. Same deal. Steel pan with that upside down reverb preset. That's definitely on my website. And someone asked about that and liked it. So let's hear all that together in the part where the melodies are happening. Something about steel pans is just like, outside of the context of like party music, is like the creepiest sounding instrument. It's so good for monster music. So there's that. What else do we have here? Let's listen to this mini mug. Okay, so there's that, and I want to compare that actually to the bass in the original version, which was just that. So put your headphones on, turn on your subwoofer without the mini moog, and then with. It's like, nothing makes a bigger difference than a mini moog. And the plugins that copy mini mugs are really good. Almost all of them are just at this point phenomenal. I recommend, in general, I mean, I wouldn't pay the price that these are now. I bought mine years ago, and it was less than half of what I see them listed for these days. So it might not be worth, you know, $5,000 or whatever they cost these days. But it's, if you can find a mini mug and you can afford one, it's the coolest thing to have in your studio. Just makes your subwoofer go vroom or burr or whatever people say. So this harp is sort of part of this battery of whatever's going on down here. And this stuff's all basically playing the same line. Very simple melody. Sort of outlining up. We've got F sharp minor being outlined here, right? Then we've got this sort of tritone thing where it becomes, you know, major for a second and then minor again. I really like using those stereo spinning things. They remind me of Leslie speakers. If you've ever recorded a Hammond organ, I just love that rotating speaker sound. And I actually usually just use the ping pong pan plugin, wherever that is. Maybe the piano. Yeah, here it is. So it's coming from the piano. I just have slow frequency. Let's listen to that real quick. Where are you? Make it go fast. So set it slow unless you want it to be like a weird roto vibe effect. Okay, and then there's little extra things in here, stuff that makes little pieces of it pop. A lot of stuff like that, usually you get that sound with like a bass or like cello bow on a cymbal or a gong. Really, really cool sounds. Pretty hard to get if you aren't good at getting them. Again, a thing I recommend buying sample libraries of. You can get some really, really phenomenal samples of those kinds of sounds. You can make them yourself if you've got the equipment for it. Here's another one that So, reverby cymbal. I think that's one of those holy symbols. So, in a book about D&D music, holy cymbal means something completely different. A crash cymbal with holes in it. Not like the thing that a cleric uses to turn on a dead. I call them holy symbols because that's what my friend who first showed one to me called it. And I think they're called something else, like special crashes or something. But I call them holy symbols. Okay, that's basically all of it. Oh, there's bassoon. I can't help myself. I use bassoon samples in almost every single thing that I make. If you're a bassoon player and you want to get hired occasionally, and you have a good recording setup, I write a ton of music that wants bassoon, and always really simple parts. This is like an open call to have a bassoon player in my contact list that I can hire to do recordings like this when there's a budget. So. And you'll notice there's some muted tracks here. I mentioned that we ended up going for a more like abstract sound. So initially, some of these instruments were woodwinds. So still sounds great, but again, if you're making stuff for somebody else, you collaborate, and the collaboration led to this. Which is in my opinion, basically the same instrument. It's like, you know, if you wanted to do a low to mid budget recording of that kind of a sound in like 1979 or something like that, you just end up with a analog synth on a pulse wave, and using mod for vibrato, and it sounds cool. It's almost like an old like 80s fantasy movie, which is like, you know, the coolest soundtracks ever in my opinion. They're just totally unbelievably badass, partially because they don't use real instruments. So I think the song actually sounds really cool with the real instruments too. Maybe I'll release a version with both, but the one that we ended up with is definitely better overall. And I think that when you collaborate with people, you end up with ideas that you might not have thought of on your own, and it's always good to listen to those ideas. Some people just try to say, yes, I agree with that because I'm getting paid, and, you know, approaching stuff with an open mind goes a really long way. So let's take a listen to the whole track, and I'll pull up the sequences. Actually, you know what? Let's just look at all of them together. Maybe this will work. Yeah, let's just look at all of it. We can see the whole thing. This will be amazing. So basically, relatively simple short track. I think it's fun to try and challenge yourself to write short songs like this, even if there is no need to do a short song. Because to make things memorable and catchy, you can use a lot of the same tactics, but you just use them on a smaller scale. Like, I think my favorite thing about this whole piece actually is that little callback to the original melody in the background synth. We've got it in the, where are you? Here. Here. So if we listen to the synths by themselves. This thing here. which is obviously borrowed from this thing here. That melody. And that bum bum is kind of like where you start writing a piece of music like this. You pick 2 or 3 notes and you make an effort to find ways to legitimize those 2 or 3 notes. And by doing that, you end up in these other places where you turn it into a question that has an answer, and you turn the answer into a, well, how is that answer related to that original thing? And then you find your way back, and as many callbacks as you can to that 2 or 3 notes. Change the key that it's in, change the part of the scale you're working with. you know, same kinds of ideas. So that's what I got. If you're here looking for my usual content, hopefully this was a fun, small departure, but not too far from what you're used to seeing. If you're coming here from the MapCrow channel and you're still here, hi. A lot of my music is available for free or cheap to use in your D&D campaign or tabletop campaign. So look me up and hopefully you can find something to do with it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you haven't already, check out the MapCrow channel and check out the Monstrous book. It should be on Kickstarter at some point this year.